I have a couple of questions for you just about practice. I thought, I wanted to ask kind of that technical question I normally ask at the end. I want to ask it at the front end. You had three practices, I think free practice one, two, and three, and then they had two qualifying sessions, Q1 and Q2, which, you ended up leaving there with a pole, and smashing it out and having speed right from the beginning. So congratulations on that one. The question I've got for you, and this is like for advice for new racers and people trying to perform better out on the racetrack. How do you approach practice? Do you and the different things that go through my head is, do you go out there and you're just looking for time, or are you out there looking for settings on the bike for feel? Or the other one that come to mind is, are you testing different lines and entries and things like that on the track so that you've got multiple data points on which way to attack that track? So what goes through your head in the practice side of it?
Yeah, I suppose from that particular weekend being one race, like I said, they sort of redone the layout. A lot of the bit of the track's changed there. So, we raced on it last year, but coming back to it after a year away, it's kind of like not starting again, but it's less fresh in your mind, and you need to spend a bit more time getting up to
Mm.
speed, I suppose. So it's a good one to talk about for that because yeah, but just because you don't just go there and it's straight away muscle memory type thing. So for me, the practices are a combination of pretty much everything that you just mentioned. Really,
Mm.
it's not just one thing in particular, but it is in a sense finding the balance between um, obviously looking for outright speed, right? So you're trying to, that's the main goal, is to be fast out with outright speed, because if you've got outright speed, that's that's a big part of the game, right? Being able to go
Mm.
fast. And the second part of it is to be able to maintain that speed for as long as you can, and ideally see how long we can maintain it over race distance. So generally speaking, like the two things that make the difference is, one, the way that you're riding the track and using the bike, and the other one is the way the bike's set up to handle the track, and trying to get the bike to work in the way that you want it to work so you can do what you want to
Mm.
do on the track. Um, so yes, it's analyzing and trying to understand, is it me? Is it the bike? It's always a combination. It really is always a bit of a combination of both. Generally, if you find a change in setting with the bike that allows you to do something else with your riding, well, then you and make an adjustment with your riding too. So it's
Mm.
never sort of just it's not just static, like it's one thing changes and that gives you the end result. But yeah, it's taking the bike that you've got during like typically we have half-hour sessions, so taking the bike you've got, trying to get a feel for the bike, and in the beginning it's definitely trying to work out your braking points, different lines, where to carry the speed, finding out where the slow point is in the turn, trying to work out, which turns you're trying to, flow through there with good mid-turn
Mm.
speed. We need to work on getting good exit speed. It's better to be strong on the entry. Um, Finding those things from your riding, and then trying to work out, okay, what's the bike not letting me do? What's the bike stopping me from doing to go faster? And then that information. That's when you have your debrief generally, at the end of the session to analyze that, and then see if we can make some changes to the bike to help you, fix up those areas, or help you work on those areas and improve that. So, um, yeah, that's pretty much the process through the practice sessions. I've got to say that one big thing that helped me, particularly on that weekend, was like working with my coach. So Steve Brogy, who I work with through the weekend. He's a bit of a spotter for me, so he's walking around the track and watching
Mm.
and comparing and seeing what's the differences are in the riding. And yeah, for me that was a big help, because it's, when you're out there riding, you're in your own zone, right? And
Yeah.
you can obviously you can feel and you can see what you're doing yourself, but because you're not out on the track following every single person, you don't know what they're doing, or they might be doing something that's better than what you're doing, right? So
Yeah.
if you have somebody to sort of spot that and see that, and bounce ideas off of, and yeah, that was a big help over the weekend too. So yeah, it's not just any one thing in particular. It's a combination of things, but
Right.
that's essentially the process every weekend, really, I suppose. yeah, trying to understand where you can be better and understand where the bike needs to be better, and hopefully getting the two to work better than everybody else by the end of the practices.
Yeah, yeah. How much do ASBK riders rely on the data that they get, from the bike and location and speed and time and things like that when they're doing that kind of work?
Look, I actually don't really sit down and look at the data a great deal myself, to be honest.
Mm.
I have done in the past, but like at the moment, I haven't been really using that a great amount. Um, Only little bits to see, let's say I do a faster lap time than what I've done previously. Well, I might just try and see on that data where that time came from. If I couldn't work it out myself,
Right. Yeah.
use the data to see where the time came from and understand which section it was in and how it happened. So that way then I can try to, continue down that path and develop it further and see if I can go faster with it. But I know that the technicians like mechanics, my crew chief Dylan, he uses the data to
Mm.
understand what's going on with the bike and what I'm doing with it and why it's not, if I'm explaining a problem, well, he'll, refer that to the
Right.
data and see, what's going on with the bike and why it might be doing that, you know what I mean? Particularly from, say, a suspension point of view, he can see the fork and shock travel,
Mm.
comparing front and rear wheel speeds. And guess the other part that we sort of focus on a bit is engine braking, trying to get that right for the track, because each track's a little bit different. So trying to
Yeah.
adjust that. So, you can see that in the data as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely gets used. Definitely gets used probably more so from a bike setup point. Just as you give your feedback as a rider, and then you sort of pinpoint that on the data for the technician to look at and explain to them in as much detail as you can. But for them, I suppose it makes more sense to see graphs or lines, the data like that makes
Mm.
more sense to them, maybe, rather than just like mine or a rider's
Mm.
interpretation of what they feel. Like that's a bit yeah, that can be a bit more complicated, I suppose. Whereas, data is
Yeah.
very just raw and real, and it's comparative between, lap to lap and track to track, so you can see what works and what doesn't work for them. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Mm.
One last question, if you were to give, listen, there's plenty of amateur riders out there who go racing and they'll do a couple of practice sessions, then a qualify, and then they'll race in their club level. They don't have access to data other than lap times, and they're probably not going to change their bike setting. They're generally going to ride with the same settings and
Mm.
pressures and everything every time they go out there. What advice would you give them around how they get the most out of a practice session? What
Mm.
would you suggest they do?
Yeah, well, like honestly speaking, there's a lot of benefit in doing that, particularly if you're at club level or you're doing a track day or whatever that is, because generally speaking, you'd say that there's a lot to be gained from your riding. So without having to focus so much on what the bike's doing and bike setup and stuff, if you can sort of like, all right, leave the bike alone, well, let's focus on what I can do and what I can change on the track with my
Mm.
riding. When there's less variables, then you know what I mean? Because if you
Yeah.
can make an adjustment with your riding, well, that's what I did is what made that faster or slower. So yeah, biggest thing to do is if it's easier if you've got sector times, because you can pick a specific sector and generally your worst sector and see if you can work on that. So try to break it down a bit if you can, rather than just focusing on a full whole lap. Um, but yeah, it's simply just a matter of trial and error with where to carry the speed and
Yeah.
doing that with, yeah, whether you brake later and harder or you brake earlier and gentler, or it's turn in earlier or turn in later, and
Mm.
trying to understand from the turn at what point the speed is best to be carried. So
Well, if you
um
get the modern, lap timing devices like speed angles, you
mm,
can break them into sectors.
yep,
So if they were doing that, that's kind of like get multiple data points in each corner rather than just do exactly the same line and thing every single time and not know if there's
yeah,
a better one. That
yeah,
what I'm hearing is chase those different data points, try a tight line and try a wide line or something and a different type of exit and then see how that affects sector time. So
yep, yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, like the reality is that with riding, like I know that at the generally speaking, you'll find that, the closer and closer you get to riders getting to the limit, the lines and the break points and everything sort of ends up at a very similar, right? Like, there's
Yeah.
obviously when the lap time gets so close like that, there's generally kind of one way of doing it really that
Mm.
everybody sort of ends up doing. But when you're not at that level, and let's say you could be 5 seconds off the pace or 10 seconds off that limit pace of the limit of traction, right? Let's say 5 or 10 seconds off the pace. Well, you can 100% work on different trying different
Mm.
lines and again, like all those things with your riding that control the bike, try to feel what it's doing and see if you can find time with it.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you for
Mm.
that. I appreciate it.